Michael, Life, Death and Hurling, a very appropriate title. I read the book like a lot of people. I went home that night and left the light on very late and finished it off the following morning. So that'll tell you how much into it I got, and I know a lot of people were the same. It's a very, very informative book, and I'm sure a hard book to write.
Well, yeah, Damian, thanks very much. I suppose that, yeah, a lot of people have said that. They went home and said they'd read a few pages and ended up as I say, staying up most of the night, and that's great to hear. But yeah, it was difficult, Damien. I suppose, just to give a little bit of background to it, I never would have really had a notion of writing a book in terms of a GAA book per se, because, even though no athlete player has written one, which I often found strange, but I wouldn't have felt that I had the credentials as a player to go writing a book. Look at all the great players, both in football and hurling. We've had Matt Connors and Martin Furlongs and Brian Whelans and the Dooleys and all these people, and I would have felt, and the Martin Hanneys of this world that maybe could have had a book in them on the GAA, but I wouldn't have ever thought about that. But I suppose then, as my life changed and evolved, and I suppose a lot of things happened, lots of ups and downs, and about this time last year, Liam Hayes approached me, or Pat Nolan, the co-authors from Tullamore. He approached me with writing a book, and I was saying that I don't know Pat, and then Irish Sports Publishing, and Liam Hayes, the former Meath footballer, is a director there, and Liam had cancer himself. He was just recovering actually this time last year from a bout of cancer, and the lads met me and they talked to me, and Liam felt it would be, having seen it himself firsthand, I suppose, what people are getting chemotherapy and are getting treatment and have cancer and the effect it can have on a family and all this. He just felt it would be a very powerful story if told by myself, and maybe just because I have a reasonably high profile and I'm fairly well known, that nobody really had done that. So that's where it started from. They got me thinking about it, and that, from my own perspective, and I started thinking about what people do go through, and the bravery, I suppose, and the dignity that people have that have cancer, and particularly when you're told it's terminal cancer. When I think the first time around, anyone that knows from cancer, when you're told you have cancer, it's an awful shock. But then when you get over that, at least you have options and you have treatment available. You have surgery and chemo and radiotherapy. But when you're told that it's terminal, it's a different. It brings it to a different level altogether. And I suppose the way Adele handled that, and the way she, went about, I suppose, first of all, coming to terms with it, and then eventually accepting it, and actually accepting the fact that she was going to die and having no fear of it was an incredible thing to see. From all sorts of points of view. So, I felt it might maybe help to people that found themselves in the same position, being sick or being a family member and trying to cope with it, and I suppose trying to live your life and go on with things every day and as if everything is normal, but at the same time, maybe that you could be talking to people, or you could be getting a bit of help along the way instead of trying to keep it to yourself. And that's what I would have done largely, and we would have done as a family. We were very private about it. So really, that's really where it came from in terms of that. And I suppose my life story was, not an awful lot different anywhere else. Everyone grows up and plays a bit of sport and does their thing, but I would have had a few different bits and pieces and lived in a few different places and played a few different sports. So I suppose when you put the whole lot together, along with the hurling and the great years with Offaly, I suppose it is, somebody feels it was warranted a book anyway, so it's up to people whether they want to buy it or not then after that.
Well, certainly, and I got a great sense of wherever you were, you had great neighbours and friends, both up in Naas and more recently in Durrow. The road that you live on there in Durrow, we know it as Little Killahy or Killahy 4 sometimes when we want to get snooty about things.
Yeah.
So a lot of...
your own there are great ones, yeah.
That's right. a lot of people...
And Dolores Ravenhill or Dolores Leonard, as should be known, yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those people, they really rode in when you were having the hardest of times.
Well, they did, and like from all points of view, like it's not all doom and gloom. We had brilliant times as well, great fun and great crack. That's really what it was about. But when we had the hard times, they were there. And I suppose like we would like to have counted ourselves as being good neighbours if we were needed either. And I think that's what a lot of said to me. Look, you do the same for us or whatever. So it was more friendship than anything, and then. And it was the small things or the big things, and just knowing that they were there, it's like no matter what it was, night or day, that you could call on them, and they were fantastic. And I suppose we've been very lucky in, when I say we, myself and Adele, over the years, we made friends quite easily, and particularly, we were always very conscious of our neighbours. Like I would have been growing up in Banner, even our neighbours were very important to us, and I came from a fairly big family, and on my mother's side in particular, and his dad was the same, a big family, and you know, it would have been family and friends and neighbours would have been very important to both of us, and without, you know, a close-knit circle, I suppose, like that, and have been a huge help.
Speaking of growing up, I suppose you grew up on Cuba Avenue, which there are more All-Ireland medals and county medals, I'd say, on Cuba Avenue than probably on any other road in Ireland. I know Marion Park in Patrick's Well boasts quite a few, and places like that, but it's up there with the best of them.
Yeah, which is great little street, really. You know, there was like Roy Mannion lived straight across the road from me, and we started school together on the same day. We're great friends and remain great friends to this day. And Tony Redden lived next door to Roy, as I said in the book, and Tony needs no introduction, the Millennium goalkeeper, and the Fogartys were just up another 2 or 3 houses, and the Whites were across the road from them, a great Rhinos Hurling family, and then Shane McGuckin was just up another few houses. Michael Keneally was moved to live there. He was originally from down the town, but he made his way up to the up our way eventually. And it was, you know, as the road up to the pitch and everything. So you know, I suppose in the space of 100 yards, you had a lot of lads that. But I suppose that was Rhinos at the time. You know, a lot of lads would have played for Offaly at some stage, certainly at minor and 21. But a lot of lads, you know, I played with Martin Hanamy and Hubert Rigney and David Hughes and Aidan Fogarty and Ryan Mannion and Kieran Flannery hurled with Offaly a bit. So like we had an awful lot of lads and up and down that wore the Offaly jersey, and it was a great time to be involved, and we had great crack along the way. And
mentioning too Rhinos, there were never too many shrinking violets came out of Rhinos Hurling Club, and any of them that made their way onto the county team, they made their presence felt. And I think you made the point in the book as well, that a lot of people mourn the fact that there are probably not more Rhinos lads on the county team today.
Yeah, unfortunately, like that's whatever went wrong. You know, but we didn't win it. We haven't won a championship now since '93, and even though we would have been very competitive right throughout the rest of the '90s and, you know, up until the early 2000s, but in the last 10 years, we fell off the radar a good bit, and you know, it was really the last more or less 18, 19 years has been a very bleak period for Rhinos, and you know, there is a recovery you'd hope underway. We're winning minor championships, and got to a senior semi-final this year, but really, you know, Rhinos haven't been producing players onto the county panel over the last number of years, which, you know, I don't know if there's a simple answer for it, because there's, you know, the school is still going there and the work has been done in the club, but I don't really know what the answer is, and it's baffling to the people down there. But, you know, we were brought up as young fellas with the Pádraig Horns and Damian Martins this world, who were, even though Offaly weren't going well, they were playing for Leinster, and then Rhinos had a great team at that period, like Barney Mild and Patrick Whelan, and all these were you know, legendary figures around the town, and that's basically was my biggest aim as a young lad, was to get onto the Rhinos senior team, and it was, you know, real film star stuff. We looked at it like as the greatest thing. Offaly didn't really enter our minds, but I think once that day in 1980 when Offaly won the Leinster and beat Kilkenny and Pádraig Horn captained them, I think that changed us all down there. And like I said, myself and Ryan Mannion, Shane McGuckin, Alan Kelly, 4 of us started school the same day, and we won minor All-Irelands, and 14 years later, whatever, together. And I think that breakthrough was the big game that made the difference for us. And Offaly winning the Ireland in '81, and it changed our mindset. It gave us it sort of, you know, we grew up not fearing anybody, not fearing Kilkenny, and Burr then came with a great bunch of lads at the same time, and Burr College had a great team, Banner Vocation had a great team, even though I went to Garbley, but both of those teams won All-Ireland colleges and All-Ireland vocational schools in 1986, and we went on and won the minor. But, you know, we played with a kind of an abandon from a young age. We didn't really care about anybody else, and it wasn't really an arrogance, it was just a confidence, and it came through sort of, as I say, from the type of player Rhinos had when we were growing up, and then it came eventually then spilled into the county scene. But, you know, it was just, I suppose, a little bit of a freak that so many of us came at the one time.
Yeah, speaking of, I suppose, that great minor success, I remember talking to my own neighbour, Willie Gorman, who would have been a selector back around that time, and he said, watch out for the minor team in 2 years' time. That's when you were about 16. He said, Offaly can win the All-Ireland minor that year if things are worked right. Now, Offaly had never won a minor before, and I don't think had won a Leinster.
No, never won Leinster, no.
And so that was a fairly a strange prediction, but it proved to be quite prophetic. They were happy days. That was a superb minor team.
It was. It was a great time for Offaly, having won the senior in '85 and '81, and then, you know, you could see the fruit of that then in '86, and you know, we didn't really see the same from '94 and '98, but that's another day's work. But we really were so interested. But I think a huge thing that time was Pacho Whelan, you know, who Brian's father, who had been such a stalwart for St. Ryan's and won 10 championships and in the middle of the field and was a great hurler himself. He moved into Borough. Why he did, I'll never know. I'll never forgive him. But we lost out now. We could have maybe have all those club All-Irelands out of Borough has if he hadn't. But I'm only joking about that. But Pacho went into Borough, and while we had great players we had savage battles with Borough at under 14, under 16 that time in particular, and they were like 12 of that minor team in '86 were from the two clubs, like 7 from Borough and 5 from Minus off the first 15, and John Kilmartin from Cormac and the two lads from Lusford, and Benny Kelly and Ronnie Byrne made up the team. And I'm not saying it was about the two men, but you can see the influence of Patch at work there. He kind of knew the players in Borough, and he knew the players in Banner, but the big thing was to gel us together because it was a very, very intense rivalry, and there was a bit of bitterness there that kind of went back over a couple of years. There had been a couple of incidents at underage matches, and it was kind of, it was outside the sport sort of thing, and Pacho was able to pull that together. I often, like it's in the book there, about the first day we met that year, about February '86, we played Laois in a challenge match, and he moved me across the dressing room and put me sitting down, I think, between Gary Cahill and Dahi Regan, and it was the very same night I was been thrown into hell as far as I was concerned, having to go over to these lads, and it turned out then we became the best of friends, and like my best friends, some of my best friends in life are still off that team and from Borough and from other places, and like I mentioned, Lusfeld and Dahi Regan and Gary. I could go through the whole lot of them. We've always remained great friends, and Pacho had a huge part to play, as did the selectors. There was an incredible bunch of people brought together at that time. You mentioned Willie Gorman. Willie Gorman is one of the great Offaly hurling people, and again, I know he's not too well again now, and he couldn't come to my launch last week. But I'd just like to wish him well while I'm on the air now today. But he's he was in there with Pat Moyle, and great hurling people that had a great interest and a great insight into the game. And wouldn't knock you down with shouting rubber. I think it's very important to have calm, level-headed. Now, people might laugh and talk about Willie Gorman and Pat Moyle and them as being calm and level-headed, but when they were playing themselves, but they had a great knowledge and love of the game and insight, and that does wear off in young lads. And I like to see lads over teams that are, that think about the game and are passionate about it, but they don't necessarily have to be going berserk at matches and that type of thing. That they're able to sort of impart their knowledge in a sort of a genial way to young lads, and I think that's important. And we had a great bunch around us that time, and with great Pacho had such confidence in us that we were going to win the minor All-Ireland from the first day we met that year. So it was a great breakthrough, and it was a special time. And Offaly minors came on afterwards and won in '87 and '89 as well, and a lot of the success then, I suppose, of the '90s came from those three teams.
Certainly did. And you went on to under 21, and I suppose the biggest crowd that ever attended an under 21 final. I know I was 2 hours trying to get away from the match afterwards outside, and I wasn't alone in that, in Portlaoise. That was one that got away, that under 21 final against Tipperary. John Lahey will be remembered by a lot of Offaly people for a stroke he pulled early in that game on one of the lads that had won a minor quite recently. Probably never fully forgiven for it, I'd say.
But I don't know about that. Like, these things happen in matches. Like if lads were to hold grudges against me, or I was to hold grudges against them for belts, it's a give or take. But like there was a few hard knocks, and see, we had 4 minors playing in that team, which was unusual. We had Brian Whelan and Johnny Dooley and Adrian Cahill and John Try, who had won minor All-Ireland just the week before. But Tip had won a senior All-Ireland with John Lahey, Declan Ryan, Conal Bonner, all starting, and a number of their subs with John Madden and George Friend and lads like Liam Sheedy, the manager. They had a stars of the team as well. But the biggest disappointment for me, there was 2 things really. Was I was captain of the team, but I got injured coming into the final, and I had a very bad groin injury, and I wasn't right. And I still feel to this day, I wore number 26, I think, that day in the final, and I still feel if I was right that we might have got over the line because there wasn't much in it, and I didn't contribute an awful lot on the scoreboard that day, which I had done a lot of scoring during the year. And the second thing was I know that it was probably the best team, I'd say, in hurling or football that ever went out to represent Offaly, in my opinion. It was incredible the talent that was in the team. It was the 3 minor teams, the best of the 3 minor teams together. Like, you had those minors I mentioned, you had Benny Kelly, Dahi Regan, Ryan Mannion, Gary Cahill, Declan Pilkington, Johnny Pilkington, Billy Dooley, and Johnny Dooley, and it was just Ronnie Byrne. You had an absolute Damian Gagan, like nearly everyone that played senior for Offaly around that period of time, and it was an incredible team, and we played such great hurling, and just every time we looked like we were going to go away, they came back and got a few, and they got 3 the softest goal. John Try won't thank me for this. I don't think he will in the book either. We're great friends, but just one of those days, a couple of balls lobbed in over his head, and different things, bouncing the ball into the net, and And
a fellow called Dan Quirk, I think, had a...
Dan Quirk got 3-1, yeah, and I never heard of it. But, and, like, I wouldn't be one for whinging. I'd normally say, look, the team won, they won, and the best team won. But I'd have to say that was one day I can stand over and say the best team didn't win. And that's why it was such a huge disappointment to me, because it was an incredibly talented team of basically senior intercounty hurlers, like, really, and we really dismissed everyone else. I actually felt Laois was the best team we played that year. We beat them in Borough on a Wednesday evening, and in an absolute classic game of hurling in a Leinster semi-final. But we beat Kilkenny quite easily in the Leinster final. And, it was one that got away. But look, these things happen, but it's one I've found it hard to get over the years. It certainly sticks in the memory, and I know it was a great crowd and it was a great match and all that, but it's a disappointment. And also, the rivalry with Tipperary, we never really played Tipperary at senior level. That was the one big chance we had of playing. The minors beat them all right in the Ireland final, but we didn't get the chance, so that's a bit of a regret as well.
And you won the senior league, the league title in '91, coming up out of Division 2, which can't be done anymore, but that's another day's work. But after that final, I do remember Vincent Hogan writing in the paper, and he was talking about this fantastic young Offaly team coming, and he identified you as the potential leader in that team going forward. That you were the natural talisman that people would turn to. We didn't get to an All-Ireland after that until '94, and you spoke of your regret at not starting that final. Injuries had played a big part that year.
They had over that period of time, between '91 and '94, it was the most frustrating time of my career. I was living in Dublin, and Eamon Cregan came in and took over Offaly in '92, and like, it's hard to believe now, everyone has cars in it, but I had no car. I was working at the bank and I struggled to get up and down from Dublin. Paddy Corrigan was on the panel that time, and Paddy was a great hurler, but he wouldn't have been that mad about training. He would have had an easy going at you, but Gavin, their eldest lad, Yvonne and himself, Yvonne is from Road, of course, and they had a young lad that year, and Paddy, between one and another, missed a bit of training, and I was missing a bit here and there, even though I was in great shape and I was young, I was fit. But then I started getting this ankle injury, this deltoid ligament started going on my ankle, and so between '92, we played Kilkenny in '92 in the first round. I was injured and I came on, but I was hardly able to walk. I was hobbling around, and the same in '93. And I think I came on in '93 and had to go off again. I couldn't start, and they brought me on, and it only lasted a few minutes, and I had to come off again. So, like, it was unbelievably frustrating. And to be fair to Eamon Cregan coming in, and Derry O'Donovan was the physical trainer, they were seeing me, and then when they wanted me, I was injured, and I suppose then I was getting a bit fed up with it. They weren't picking me, and a sort of a lack of trust sort of developed, I think, between the whole lot of us. And I never talked to Eamon Cregan about this, but that was my view on it. And I remember in '94 there was one particular Sunday. It was about February. There was a World Cup match down in Meath against Meath, and I was picked to play midfield, and I didn't go. And it was the only time ever you'd hear about lads not doing. I would always have gone anywhere, like when there was an Offaly jersey on offer. But I was so fed up with everything that I didn't go. And I remember Cregan calling me outside in Rat the following Tuesday night. There was about 3 inches of snow on the ground. We were going training, and he said to me, "You didn't? Where were you?" And I said, "Look," I said, "I'm fed up with the whole lot." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Look at this and that and the other." And he said, "But you can't just decide." And I said, "I know," but I said, "I'm all right in the winter, but you won't pick me when the championship, or whatever, or the league match." And we had it out fairly hot and heavy anyway, and kind of after that we got on grand. It was typical. Maybe just a few things had to be said, but of course, I got back in the team in '94. Then Leinster final, brilliant against Wexford, and the game was on about 10 minutes, and the thing snapped again, and I played on the whole game because there was no way I was going off, because I didn't. I wanted to try to work through it. I was only after getting back in the team. We won that championship. Of course, I was injured then up until the semi-final. I never trained at all, and was off obviously and heavily strapped. And I was brought on with about 15 minutes to go, and I got 3 chances of scoring points, and I scored the hardest one. I hit one into the goalie and one wide, and I think if I'd scored the 3 of them, they would have had to start me in the final, but I didn't, and I gave the ankle a bit of it, and I missed a bit of training again. And Eamon came to me in fairness before the final, and it's easy, like, looking back now I can accept it, and he said, "Look, you came on the last day, made a big difference, and we're going to hold you in reserve again." And it was just what I was describing in the book was more, you give your sort of whole life to get to that stage, and I'd had a few very frustrating years, but I had fought my way back into the team, and then left off again. So it was very, very disappointing. But I got over it. Like, I was disappointed, that night. But by the time the match came around, I was ready to play my part, like whatever part that would be. And but funny, after that day, I resolved after that I learned to get myself fully right, and I did, and I never missed an Offaly match again then for for the next 6 or 7 years until I retired.
Yes, and that particular day, of course, sometimes known as the 5-minute final, perhaps slightly unfairly, but that last 5 minutes, I mean, was it freakish or was it just that Offaly finally woke up? What kicked it off, really? I know there were goals.
It was only one thing. It was Johnny Dooley, and Johnny Dooley had the guts and he had the instinct to go for a goal. When he was told to go for a point, Johnny Dooley knew that the All-Ireland was going away from us, that we'd played terribly. He knew instinctively. He didn't have time to think about it in all that context. But again, I haven't spoken to Johnny, but his hurling brain, his whole personality, instinct told him that we were gone in the All-Ireland final if we didn't get a goal. And he was told to put it over the bar, but he went for the goal and he buried it. And it shocked Limerick. And Joe Quaid poked the ball out straight away. And next thing, Pat O'Connor had it in the back of the net. It was 23 seconds between the first goal, Johnny Dooley taking the free, and the second ball hitting the net for the second time. So that was it. And then once we did that, Limerick just died under their feet. And the whole shock to the system, and then it was just bang, 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 and over the bar. And Billy Dooley, I think, knocked over about 4 points in that period. And it was the most amazing turnaround ever, and that's when we'll ever see one like it again. But and Limerick are shell-shocked. And see, they still talk about 94 down Limerick, when 96 was probably a worse defeat because they never hurled at all in 96. And Wexford never hurled, whereas Wexford had hurled brilliantly against us in the Leinster final in 96, but never turned up in the All-Ireland final, and neither did Limerick. And Limerick couldn't get over the line there either. So a bit like Waterford, I suppose, in the next number of years, they couldn't get over the line. So it was freakish, and we didn't play well, but we stuck in there and we kept in the game, and we had enough, and as I said, we had the genius of Johnny Dooley then to turn it around.
Yeah, and how quickly fortunes can change. I think probably one of the finest years I've seen Offaly playing hurling over the last 20-30 years was 1995, right up to the All-Ireland final. Indeed, right up until a few minutes from time in the All-Ireland final, hammering Kilkenny in the process that year. That was the most comprehensive defeat I'd say Kilkenny ever suffered in a championship match. And the last few minutes of the All-Ireland final against Clare, the tide was with them, and even though they probably weren't as good a team as Offaly, even on the day, they got over the line.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I couldn't sum it up any better. The 95 Leinster final display was our best ever display as a team. There's no doubt about that. It was absolutely phenomenal. 2-16 to 2-5, I think, against Kilkenny in the Leinster final, and they got 2 goals in the last couple of minutes. We completely destroyed them that day in a great game. It was only 5 points to 3 at half time, but it was one of the greatest games of hurling I'd say played in any era. And in the final, again, we didn't play well. We didn't play well in 94. We didn't play well again in 95. I don't know what it was. And Clare were physical and whatever, but we just didn't get into the game, and the Clare crowd was very influential, and the whole, they hadn't been in it for so long, and Duignan was a strong manager, but having not hurled well, we still had it in the bag really, and we missed a few chances before really, we left Clare in the match. Really, we should have been 5 or 6 points up and been out of sight, and we didn't do that. And in fairness to Clare, they stuck away, and they got the rub of the green, with the ball off the post that broke back, and they got the goal, and we couldn't get back into it. So it was a big disappointment, and I suppose that's the way. Look, we mightn't have won 94, we might have won 95, or maybe we could have won both. That was the disappointing thing. We could have been going for 3 in a row in 96, and it might have been enough because Wexford played brilliant to beat us in the Leinster final. But maybe if we had 2 All-Ireland under our belt, we would have had the incentive to be going for 3 in a row. We might have, there might have been another one. So that's the ifs and buts and mights. But I wouldn't begrudge Clare to All-Ireland with a great team, and I wouldn't begrudge Wexford in 96 with some of the great players they had. And maybe that was a little bit part of it. Maybe we weren't ruthless enough to, like Kilkenny, want to win everything. We won a couple, but I think it was a very, very, very competitive era, and I thought, maybe we could have got 1 more All-Ireland in that period, but 2, we'd have to settle for the 2 we won.
And speaking of the 2 you won, I suppose a lot of people had dismissed Offaly as a one-team wonder by the time 98 came around. Quite an amazing year. Babs Keating at the start of the year. Now, you give more credit than maybe a lot of people would have to Babs Keating, particularly for the good physical training that was done in the early part of the year. And that did stand to you. But the effect that Michael Bond had coming in, the row with Johnny Pilkington over the airwaves, it's just a year that nobody will ever forget outside of Offaly as well as in Offaly.
You couldn't make it up, and that's only, you get a glimpse of it in the book from me. But like, you know, I suppose if you really got into it, there's nearly a book in '98 on its own. You know what I mean? There was so much coming and going, and some of the training we did was savage. You know, it was just unbelievable down in Shinone, first of all, circuit training during January, and then up down in Banner. Then we used to be doing these 3,000 metre runs and 1,500 metre runs against the clock. Like, and we trained hard now for a good few years. Like, there was a myth out there that we didn't train, but you know, we did most of us, like, and generally lads did train very, very hard and were in great shape. And I certainly was, you know, big into athletics. And I had a lot of hard training under my belt up before '98. You know, I was around athlete panels for a long time at that stage, and yet the training was savage, you know, and we were incredible. We were in great shape, and it did stand to us definitely against Clare in the 3 matches against Kilkenny. But there was an awful lot of stuff going on, and Babs was a larger than life character, and you know, he was he was great crack, you know, among other. But like, he just lost that. I'd say he thought we were bet, and we were gone out of the championship, and he went along, and him and Johnny had it out, and he went, and this man came in from nowhere, then Michael Bond, who was just like a breath of fresh air, like the most confident man, and confident in our ability, confident in his own ability, and no doubt in his mind, and he impressed us that we were going to win the All-Ireland. Like, and you sort of start off, I think he was half mad, and maybe he was, but it worked. Like, and he was just incredibly positive, and you know, and then like the whole thing against Clare, he couldn't, like, the first day we probably had them bet, and then the second day they had us bet. They had, like, the thing and the city, and then the day down in Thurles, and it was just a great summer for hurling, a great summer for athlete. And then you had the whole Clare Water thing going on down in Munster, and Duignan accusing priests of talking about them, and there was all sorts of conspiracy theories, and Colin Lynch and the granny, and like, it was just incredible stuff. And to come out on top then, I suppose the only thing, and I always say this, is the final is forgotten about a little bit in the middle of everything, the '98 All-Ireland, which was a brilliant game, and you know, a great Kilkenny team that had come in under the radar, and they were lying in wait, and with a great forward line, you know, with DJ and Charlie Carter, and you know, PJ Delaney and Brian McAvoy and Andy Comerford. They were all in that forward. John Power was gone, wasn't he? Yeah, John Power was dropped, but they had a powerful team that time, and it was a great All-Ireland final. And the switch of Brian Whelan up front where he scored a 1-6 was massive, and you know, it was just a great, even that, like, it was fairy tale stuff. So it was one of those years, and I think you're right, but I think it cemented us, our reputation as a team, that if we hadn't won that All-Ireland and had just won the one in '94, you know, our legacy might have been different. But I think once we won that year and won that All-Ireland, you know, and we got a couple of All-Irelands in that era, and we're thereabouts. I think for 7 or 8 years we either won the All-Ireland or the team that bet us won the All-Ireland, you know, so we were never too far away, and I think we'll be remembered fondly as a team.
I was interested in the book to see that you had, you know, 1 or 2 final nails to drive in that year. Not nails to drive, but just things to solve. And that you met Jimmy Cooney, a man who had forgiven you, and you make out as a hurler more than as a referee, for a stroke pulled on David Ford. And then you went and harangued him when the time was cut short in that match.
That'd be me.
Well, you met him anyway, and you're all friends again.
Well, I did. Well, it was, see, well, anyone that knows me, you know, I do kind of, on the spur of the moment, I'd do, but I wouldn't hold grudges for too long. A few minutes is all it'd be, and I might lose it on the field. But I was never, you know, we've always been sporting, and if you bet you're better sort of thing. But that day, I suppose I was fighting my corner, you know, and I probably sensed it more very quickly that this was the end of us, you know, that, like, that whole '98, you know, a lot of us were getting on at that stage, and, you know, well, I was 30, but, you know, Joe Dooley would have been in his 30s, and Martin Hanamy, you know, and a lot of lads had mileage on the clock, a lot of mileage. So here we are, and it kind of, when you kind of knew straight away there was something wrong and that the game wasn't over, so that was the haranguing point. I should have been sent off, there's no doubt about that, and if we weren't so far behind that, I think we could have been even 10, 11 points down when I pulled the stroke, and you know, I was able to appeal to Jimmy Cooney, the hurler, more than Jimmy Cooney, the referee. And Jimmy was a tough corner back himself now. I think anyone remember him playing. He was
surely.
And comes from a great hurling family. And he knew probably that it wasn't my style either. Like, I wouldn't have been regarded as a dirty player. And so I talked about it anyway, whatever way I did it. And I got away with it. And I ended up winning the All-Ireland and winning. But the one thing that always lingered with me was that I'd never, and I was going to ring him, and then I said it was too soon. And then it came up again in 2005. Gerald Duignan wrote an article in the Star, and I challenged it, and I started writing for the Sunday Star that time. And I defended him, but I hadn't seen him then, and then time moves on. But last year I was down at Galway, or a couple of years ago I was down in Galway at the races, and I saw him. I was going to the toilet at one stage, and I could have slipped away with the crowds down there, but he was sitting down, and I knew it was probably his wife with him, and there was a couple of people around, and I just said, look, I'll go. So I just went over and I said, look, how are you doing? And I just said to him, look, I wanted to say basically what I said there, you know, sorry for giving you abuse after, and this, that, and the other. And we ended up having a mighty chat, and I met his wife and a couple of his daughters, and we had a great chat, and I would have had great admiration for the Coonies, and he said a few nice things to me about the 100 and about playing for Offaly and all that, and we left on great terms, and it was brilliant to have done it. It was just that it was the only thing that was outstanding from '98, because I'd be sort of into people. I would like falling out with people, and I'd get on well enough with people. So I did fall out with a few up and down. You'll see that in the book too, but it wouldn't be in my nature. So it was grand to be able to put that to bed, and I suppose finally wrap up '98, which was probably the greatest year we had in an Offaly jersey, most of us.
Yeah, I often look at days that you had with Offaly, and they corresponded with us as supporters, the great days that we had looking at you performing. One of the happiest days I ever went out of Croke Park was the day that you beat Cork in the All-Ireland semi-final in 2000. Vincent Hogan, again, who I often read and I quote regularly, he said that there were a team of Corinthian athletes taking on a bunch of a team stuck together with elastoplast. And he got criticised for that statement at the time by some quarters in Offaly, but I wrote to him actually, and I said that irony is something that describes the water here. We don't always get it in Offaly. I think he was actually given as a backwards compliment.
Yeah. Well, I think he was talking about. I know I was very badly injured, or bad hamstring, and Brian Whelan myself. And Brian started that day out in the Old Bond Clinic in Tala, getting treatment and getting strapped up. And I think it might have been a reference to that really, where when he came in after, there was a lot of, but and a lot of us, there was a lot of mileage on the clock. But that was a great day, because in '99 the bet was 16 points off with 10 minutes to go, and they pulled away and bet us 19-16. And John Try was penalised for that great flick off Brian up off the ground, and Brian Corcoran dispossessed. And really that was a game that we could have won, and they went on and won the All-Ireland, and then to come back again really on our last legs as a team and beat Cork that day was a great day. Yeah. And it probably took too much out of us, like we were so disappointed in the final after, and a bit like you said there, you were thrilled going out, we were nearly a bit thrilled going out too, that we'd eventually beaten Cork, like we hadn't, and maybe put Semple Stadium to bed from '84 and that type of thing. And it, definitely we couldn't get ourselves up again for the final, and and Kilkenny got the dream start in that final, and DJ got a goal, and you could feel the weight lifting off the crowd and off his shoulders, because DJ wouldn't have had a great record in finals maybe up until that final, and we kind of felt if we could stay in it with 20 minutes to go, the pressure beyond them, and we could maybe turn the screw. But they kind of got a few early goals, and I missed a great goal chance before their second or third goal. That I think we were 5 down, and I missed a chance. I would have brought it back to 2. I pulled in a ground ball and went out by the post, and I really should have scored it. And from the puck out, they scored another goal. Next, there was 8 points in it instead of 2 going in at half time, and there could have been even more in it at half time. I'm not sure, but it was all over. And it was a pity really going out in that, but at least we had the Cork, we had the Cork win under our belts. But you don't like getting beaten like we were in that Ireland final either.
No, certainly not. And I suppose you were coming to the end of a sporting career at that stage. A lot of the lads were, and just on your own career, of course, we could talk all day about it. You had of course played with the footballers and held Colm O'Rourke scoreless until he crept in for a late goal in a football championship match back in the late 80s. You had been involved with Naas Rugby Club, winning the Towns Cup and playing Division 3 of the AIB League. When the sporting career came to an end, Michael, and this is where I suppose you make a very important point, that sometimes players feel an entitlement to live a little bit because they've given so much to sport, and it can affect players. You talk very candidly and openly about your own life and things like alcohol and gambling on horses and things like that fellas get into. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a thing I always sort of felt strongly about, but I wouldn't have realised at the time that I was doing it. But looking back now, I think when you're playing, you become incredibly selfish at the top level, because everything is about you. It's all about your training, your matches, what you're doing. Everything is around your timetable. And when you're in a relationship or a marriage or going out with somebody, it's difficult for them. But you don't. And you have to put the hurling or football number one if you want to be really successful. And I think people that aren't involved in sport at that level might find that very hard to understand, and they might say, that's nonsense. But that's actually what does happen. And you do get very sad without even realising. And then when you're finished playing, well, what I found in my position was, you kind of feel, oh God, I'm after doing this for 15 years, and generally you'd have your down season and your fuming, but generally you're very, very disciplined, and you're dictated by your sporting life. And like even if I went out for a pint during my playing days during the winter, I'd always train the next day because you'd feel, you'd be trying to keep your fitness levels up and you'd feel guilty about it or whatever. And so, yeah, like I just found myself, going off maybe and sort of going to the pub during the week, a couple of evenings a week. And it wasn't even that, I wouldn't have been that interested. I was always able to drink a few pints, but I wouldn't have been that bothered about it. But it was just more that you could do it, that you could go for a few pints on a Thursday evening or a Monday evening or whatever, or go for a game of golf or go out with the lads. And all of a sudden you're in the pub 3 or 4 nights a week and you're going off playing golf classics and you're doing this, that and the other, and you're still trying to create that buzz that you had as a player. So you're away somewhere and you'll stay the night and you'll have a good few pints and you might even have a few the next day, and there's people around you and you're kind of trying to stay up in the limelight or stay around the place by doing other things, and really you're doing yourself a lot of damage in your family life and all that. And I was lucky enough I was able to address it, and a lot of lads are, but a lot of lads aren't either. And I think that's why you see a lot of GA players that, especially lads that are successful, there's quite a number of them do fall in hard times in different ways, whether it's gambling or drink or whatever happens to them. And it's something that I think the GPN are aware of, and there's a players advisory group and there's a past players benevolent fund set up to help lads that do, and it does happen to them or fall in hard times. But it is something that I think is not considered, but it is a big factor. And even I'd say lads, loneliness, and they get a bit depressed, a lot of lads as well, and because the dressing room becomes your family and becomes an awful lot to you, and a place that you go and you look forward to going 4 or 5 nights a week. And then when you're successful, especially, I think then it makes it even all the more difficult because you have all that adulation that goes with it, and the big days in Croke Park with 60, 70, 80,000 people and team holidays and all that type of thing. It's very, very hard to, for some people, I'm not saying for everyone, but I think for a certain amount of people, it's hard to leave it behind and just get back then down to sort of, what I suppose we're all supposed to, just back down to ordinary family life. It takes a little while for people, for us all to settle down, and it's just something that I wanted to just say in the book that, again, it might help other lads that are going through it just to be aware of it and just to be, conscious of it before you retire, that there is a big hole there to be filled afterwards.
Well, you started the book and you were talking about Edel, and you finished the book on Edel, and Edel was a very special person, and I know from a lot of her friends who would be also friends of mine, she was that special person.
She was very successful in her own right professionally in her job. She was a very honest woman, and whatever she when she did, she was organised, and she was big into the family and big into the lads, and the say only the good die young, so she it was tough, but like it really, the bravery and the way she accepted things was just unbelievable. And she just, I don't know, I wouldn't have been able to do it, and I think most people wouldn't be able to do it, but if you can die happy, she did. She accepted that she was going to a better place, and she prepared the lads well for it, and they're going well. So it was kind of unbelievable, really, looking at it, and it's hard to believe maybe still that it's happened, but that's I suppose that's life. And I think she left a very good legacy behind her, and that's all I can say.
Well, Michael, all I can say is it's a book that I would heartily recommend. I know that sports GA books often win the books of the year, the sports book of the year, and I'd say this will be a contender, having read all the ones that have won it in previous years. It's up there with the best of them, and well done to yourself, and well done to Pat Nolan there, another local connection, on a fantastic book, and I hope it sells a fortune.
Absolutely, and just Damian on that, Pat Nolan is a young guy, 29 now. I think he was 28 when he started the book, and the commitment that he put into it. He's from Tullamore. He works for the Daily Mirror there as a sports journalist, but I think we'll hear an awful lot more about him. But the way he, in fairness to Pat, like these life issues and things, like he's a GA fanatic and an awfully fanatic. I think he found that part of the book very easy to write, but for him to write the rest of the book with me, and we spent many hours at it, just to pay a tribute to Pat for his understanding and for his grasp of the issues, and I suppose the time that he put, the commitment that the man put into it was just unbelievable. So just publicly, I suppose, first locally and publicly, the first